You're listening to episode number 50 of the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This is a transformational story episode, and in this episode I visit with Lisa. And you're going to hear Lisa say that she was a, air quote, hot mess when we started working together. She'll tell you that she was an enabler, she was in a less than positive relationship, and she was upside down in many areas of her life. So I'm sure that many of you will be able to relate to her story, so keep listening. Hi, I'm Jim Fortin, and you're about to start transforming your life from the inside out with this podcast. I'm widely considered the leader in subconscious transformation, and I've coached superachievers all around the world for over 25 years. Here, you're going to find no rah-rah motivation and no hype, because this podcast is a combination of brain science, transformational psychology, and ancient wisdom all rolled into one to take your life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting a lot more in life, to feel better, to heal, to have peace of mind, to feel powerful and alive, and to bring more abundance and prosperity into your life, then this podcast is for you, because you're going to start learning how to master your mind and evolve your consciousness. And when you do that, anything you want then becomes possible for you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so today, all the way from Australia, and it's early in the morning over there right now. So we're visiting with Lisa. She's a transformational coach. She's been in my programs now for almost a year and a half. And we're going to talk about Lisa's story. Yeah, it's been a long time. She's nodding her head. We're going to talk about Lisa's story, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. And let's just dig in. Lisa, the short version, tell them where you were when we met emotionally in your life and where you are now.
I remember exactly where I was when I was on the webinar that I jumped into TCP on the back of. I was in Laguna Beach. I was there for James Wedmore's mastermind event in Laguna Beach. And so obviously being from Australia, that's a big deal. I was away from my family. I have 3 young children. They're 8, 7, and 5. And I used to have a lot of guilt, like leaving the kids and leaving my partner who has significant mental health issues. It was a big deal for me to get on that plane and come to the other side of the world. But I knew that I needed that kind of high vibe and I needed mentorship and, James, obviously. But I remember sitting there on the bed listening to this webinar thinking, I know I am the reason why certain things aren't happening in my life. And it's funny because now, 18 months later, I can reflect back and go, I didn't know shit. Like, I didn't know anything. I thought I knew what that meant. I thought I knew what it meant to be the block in my life, but I didn't really have any sense of how to move through it. And because hang
on, let's give them a little more background, if you would, and you can be as personal or not as personal as you want. It's up to you. But I think you've opened up to your audience a lot in the last year. Where was your life? I mean, the quality of your life at that time, because I want them to see where you were and then take them through your journey to where you are today.
Okay. It's hard to talk about. And you know that. Like, I was all the emotion.
Breathe. She was when I met her, she was a hot, emotional mess. The hot mess. We call it in the United States.
Definitely. Yeah, we call it a hot mess too. Okay. It's a universal language of being completely I was at the mercy of my emotions. I didn't think I had any choice in my life. So I'd lived interstate away from family and friends for 10 years. I'd had my 3 children on my own, with no family support. It was just my husband and I, and he had I can see now that the mental health stuff was going on for a very long time, and I was very much in the fixing mode. I was very much in the doing everything for everybody else. I didn't even know how to prioritize myself. But I had created I had created a Whole Foods blog back when I just had the 2 kids. And I got so much enjoyment from sharing recipes and showing up on social media. I have a background in journalism and TV production and that sort of stuff. And I found social media just like, hello, here's a platform. I'm just going to play. I would be, walking around my house with a sweat mustache because we lived in Queensland, which is tropical weather. And I felt people connecting to me on a very real level. So I was following this, and I launched an online program, and it went bananas. My first launch, I had no list at all.
But hang on, before you keep going here, because we're going into, you're moving here. Let's go back. Just breathe. Just breathe. We're going back to.
I feel like there's so much I need to say. But
I know, no, just we'll get there. I know that you've talked a lot about to your audience about your personal life and your husband. So whatever degree you're comfortable talking, when you say mental illness, that leaves people don't know what that means. So it can be anything. So I'm wanting people to be able to connect with your story so they can be like, oh, okay. So what does that mean? And if you want to share, and if you don't, that's fine too. What does it mean when you say mental illness?
Well, I don't. I mean, I haven't shared really publicly ever what his particular struggles are, because it's really personal for him. But I think for a long time there was anxiety and depression and all of those sorts of things, but a lot of deep trauma that he experienced in childhood that he was kind of self-medicating himself through until that stuff didn't work anymore. And in 2017, so I think that's where I was sort of going to. I'd become this self-sufficient. I can do everything. I'm starting a business. I'm doing all this stuff. And then he had a breakdown in 2017, and that led to this sort of road of recovery for him. That I just had to take on all of the suddenly my business was our income, our family's income. He wasn't a particularly present person in our lives, even although he was here. He was dealing with his stuff, and I was very much in that kind of codependent relationship where I felt like I had full responsibility for his happiness, his welfare, for fixing him. I felt like it was all on me. I felt like there was things that I was doing or wasn't doing that actually impacted him and made him feel a certain way. So I was, and in the meantime, I wasn't taking care of myself. You know, we ended up moving back to our hometown, and I got shingles. And I was really, really sick. And I had my big wake up call when James actually said to me, Lisa, you're not being responsible for yourself. And I was like, what? You don't understand. Like in my mind, I'm like, you don't understand responsibility. You don't understand 3 young children. You don't understand an unwell husband. You don't understand that I am responsible for our income now. Like you don't know anything about responsibility.
Yeah.
But I did get what he was saying at that time. And it actually led to a really big breakthrough for me, which was, Lisa, no one else is going to do this for you. No one else can make it better for you. No one else can take care of you, and all that sort of stuff, which led me to you. And that led me to going, you know what, like if I'm creating everything in my life, because it's all coming from within me, I'm allowing certain things, I'm making certain things okay, then I've got to look at myself. And I was deeply, deeply, deeply uncomfortable doing that because I was in that mindset of it's if only my husband was well.
Yeah.
If only we weren't having to deal with this. If only all the kids were in school, I could focus on my business. I mean, just all the stories that were actually stopping me from putting the mirror back on myself and going, hang on, what role are you playing in this, Lisa? And, since then, this year I've actually separated from my husband. And it's been an extraordinary process of waking up.
Hang on, right there. I don't want to interrupt because people are like, let her keep going. But I want to go back here. So where you were, that whole, notice everyone listening that she did say stories and stories and stories, which you've heard Jason talk about, you've heard Katie talk about, and the Duck talk about, which we do at TCP, is we don't recognize the amount of stories that we get into. Now, what I heard you say is basically you were playing victim and not responsible to everything in the world. Not only were you trying to keep your world together, then you were looking out for the kids and you're like, okay, now my husband's not working and I'm the money earner and we have kids and we live here. Now, not only that, let me be responsible for him too. And then whatever I do, if he gets angry or he gets this or he gets that, then it's my fault. So what you were doing is you were trying to manage every single person and every
Mm,
single thing in your life. You were exhausted. You were a
mm.
hot mess. And I remember when I first met you, I'd pull you out of your story. You used to love, like a rubber band, to snap back and go right back into your story again, right?
It was like a habit. It was a brain habit.
Exactly. It was a habit where you'd go right back. And by the way, you've taken what you've done and you become, which we'll keep on going here, and you've taken a lot of what you've learned and we'll talk about and become a coach, a transformational coach now for a lot of people in Australia. Through having your experience, you now know how to help people through those kinds of experiences. And it doesn't have to be the mental health or self-medicating or any of that, but you've learned tools over the last 18 months that no longer you smile now. And when I saw you 18 months ago, you were crying all the time.
Crying all the time. But that was a
Exactly.
story. I'm just an emotional person. You know, that even
Yeah.
that is a story.
Yes.
That I allowed myself to be led by my emotions, and I didn't realize the patterns I was in. I didn't realize it. And that's why I help. That's why, I know I created the Ready for Change program, because I actually think stories, like if you actually really understand how you're telling yourself so many lies, you've just
Yep.
made up your entire life, and you've built this like glass box for yourself to live in. And when you can actually see that for what it is, it's extraordinarily freeing. And you get to start living a life like, that you create intentionally instead of just by default.
Yeah, and look at you now. I mean, I don't know where the team's going to use this particular interview, whether we're going to just do audio or video, some probably video also on YouTube. So you do have makeup on this morning. Normally, she's actually shooting video in bed, and she's pretty anyway, so it doesn't matter. And she's got 3 small kids. But notice 18 months ago how you were constantly crying, and then part of the story was, well, I'm just an emotional person. Now every time I've seen you, and especially when I saw you because you're in my mastermind, and when we were talking about the money you were making either this year or next year, you're like, you know what? No, it's $1 million a year when you were in the front of the room, remember? And
Mm.
18 months ago, you were like flipped upside down. Where
Mm.
are you today? And then we're going to bridge that for listeners.
Okay, I mean, I can give an example that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, even although I am not living with my husband anymore, and we're making a separation,
Mm-hmm.
he's still very much struggling with himself and his life. He has lived in a kind of a care house for 6 months, and he recently got out of that and has spiraled out of control. And I'm in launch for my program,
Right.
and
She means internet marketing launching a program.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Launching my program, which means I need to be visible, which there's a lot of exciting energy around a program launch. And,
Yeah.
I'm so excited to welcome new people in. And yet there's this, and it's been this dance for me the whole time, because anytime I would disappear off and have my focus somewhere else. That really affected him.
In the past.
And
I
in the
mean, now you're not
past,
with me, but in the past, yeah. So he
yeah,
would draw you
yeah.
right back down again.
He would draw me in. Yeah. I mean, you saw me have to fly home from Laguna Beach one time early.
Yeah.
It was real. It was,
Stop right. Wait. No, before you keep on, stop right there. You said you saw me have to fly home. You and I had a conversation. Rather, do you want to change the phrasing on that?
I chose to go home.
Because,
That was a particularly interesting situation.
but generally, you were just in your emotions at that
I
point.
was, I
Yeah.
was, I was still very, very heightened. I still was in it. Like I was
Yeah.
really in it, and I was working my way through all this stuff, but I wasn't at the place that I am at now. And I think that's a really important thing for people to know. It's why people do TCP so many times, because we want to stay in the content, because it's like layers of an onion, and
Yeah.
you kind of get this sense that things can be different, or you get this sense that you're growing, but as it becomes like the domino effect, like if you pile dominoes up in a row and one falls and you're like, there's all these dominoes, because my life just keeps getting better and better and better. But
Hang on right there,
at
because
that,
I want to take apart for them.
okay. Yeah.
Notice, do you remember? Okay, so she flew to Laguna Beach. I was there. She got there like one afternoon, and next morning she's ready to go back to Australia again. This massive flight. I mean, the flight's longer than the time she was there. And she was a hot mess. And I'm like, come here. And we sat down and talked. And you were crying when we started and everything else. 45 minutes later, you were laughing. And I said, have you noticed you're not crying anymore? You know where I'm going, right? And I said, what happened? And I said, you have moved your attention, which people hear me talk about a lot. When you moved your attention, your entire emotional state changed. Now, where you are in your life now, your husband hasn't probably changed. And there's nothing. It is what it is. But the external things in the world have not changed that much, most likely in a year. But it's where your attention is and how much you've changed in a year, that if they could see you on video, you're smiling when you talk about your future. It's because that's where your attention was. But for the most part, things and people in life are the same things and people they were 18 months ago. But you're not the same, and your attention is not the same.
Right.
Right?
And it's had 100%. So now I know I have a choice about how, because this is the thing, like I was massively triggered by you just saying you just my attention in Laguna because it didn't change what had actually happened at home and the fact that I really felt I needed to be back here.
Yeah.
But what I've realized ever since then is the amount of choice that I have around my attention, and that things can still happen that are uncomfortable or sad or even traumatic. But it's my choice, the energy that I give that and the attention that I give that. And my life isn't necessarily better the more attention I give it. Whereas I used to I just need to think, like, what do I need to do? And, just be really in it and really messy. And because that was my pattern.
Yes.
Whereas right now, I'm like, Lisa, the only thing that you can manage right now is where you place your attention and your energy And so I kind of am like, even although all this stuff is happening, and that's what really started to change for me. We talk about it's a process that you have to go through. But last year I really started to experiment through, TCP and working with you was my energy and understanding literally, like, I get to choose how I show up to the day, no matter what's happening around me, because I get to dial that in. Like, which frequency do I want to operate? Like, where do I want to position? Yeah. And so I know I say to a lot of people, you can choose to be happy. Like I have literally chosen the story of my separation. I have chosen for that not to be a failed marriage. It's not a failed marriage. Like we had a great marriage. We loved each other in a way that we understood to be love at that time. But now it's just like the evolution of that relationship. It's just in a different spot right now. It doesn't have to mean tragedy for my children. It doesn't have to mean I am an overwhelmed hot mess again because I'm solo parenting. It doesn't have to mean anything like that.
Except the meaning that you give it.
You give it. Like it's my choice. And so, that is a really powerful position to be in. And people, I think, look at me like, why aren't you kind of worse?
And sad and crying and
Yeah. And I mean, I certainly went through a period of grief, and I know it's important to recognize, like, our emotions. I sort of see them now as like a little guidepost. Like, there's something here for me, but I look at it as something that I can work through and that I can then choose to move out of. Yeah. And that I don't have to stay in it. And I mean, this is a very different Lisa to a year and a half ago.
Yes. Yeah. And let me add here. I know that you're predominantly visual, so you're excited and you move really fast, but there's something in here, a couple of things I've never shared with you before, is that you have become a much more powerful role model for your kids now, because they're watching the powerful version of you, not the old version of you. And they're at a formidable age where, had this continued 5 more years, you would have unconsciously taught your kids how to be in a relationship, and it's a broken relationship, and they would have learned that. Now they're learning something different. Secondly, a lot of people can probably relate to this. I've never asked you this question. Do you before you separated from your husband, did you not separate because you felt guilty, because you felt responsible for his well-being?
Yes, I thought it would make him feel worse.
Okay, so that's where I wanted to go. So partly, not entirely, partly what kept you in a broken just a dysfunctional relationship was that you thought, okay, this isn't working, but if I leave, then he's going to be worse and I must be responsible for him. And therefore I feel guilty. So therefore I stay, even though this doesn't work. Because I know a lot of people are probably thinking that. And how did you get through that?
Yes, there's that. There was the feeling very responsible for his mental state. There was also a kind of, I actually don't think I even entertained the thought of leaving because my model of parenting was to stick together. So I grew up watching my mum stick by my dad through his mental health challenges. And, dad overcame them, but it was a very significant part of my growing up was dad and his challenges, and watching my mum sacrifice herself and what she needed in order to make dad better. So my model of reality was just like, I literally don't even think I realized I could make a decision for myself and what I needed. Like, does that make sense? Like it didn't even come in. But then when I realized this was like, when I realized I was done, I actually remember it was actually a very, very, very clear moment. And I remember feeling I was driving away from where he was staying at that time. He was in a hospital. And even although he was in such a bad way, I just suddenly knew, because I'd been doing the work on myself and my own levels of personal responsibility, I knew that if he wasn't going to be responsible for his own health and recovery, then what was I trying to do? Like what? And how long was I going to allow this to be okay? How long could I keep depleting myself? What example was that setting for my children? And I remember I was driving and I literally just not literally, but I felt myself taking the hands off the wheel of his life. And I just was like, it's his job. And for some reason, that was a really big moment for me, moving from someone who felt very responsible. And so then just the craziest stuff started to happen, Jim. I got all these crazy signs. I've had people come into my life. I got all these signs. It was just like the universe had been waiting for me. Just go, come on, back to you now. Like, let's do this. Like, you are supported. And it's just been like miracle after miracle after miracle.
Well, and I want to go there and like where you are today. So I made a couple of notes here. One more thing, as you'd mentioned, being triggered, as you know, that Nicole says, which she's been on my program multiple times and she's in the mastermind.
I love
she says,
Nicole. Yeah.
I adore Nicole. And she's like, if you're not crying or cussing at Jim, you're not getting your money's worth in his work.
It's true. It's true.
And I remember Fiona, the best video ever. She was in the group recently and she's back in it again. And she posted this video and she goes, the program, everything he does really works, but effing Jim. And I laughed so hard at that. It's my job to push people's buttons, as you know, because once we get triggered and we start working through that, we stop being triggered, because being triggered is no power. And most of us go through our entire lives being triggered. So that's why I don't, and all I do intentionally sometimes trigger people, because I want to actually poke, which I've talked about before, because if I keep poking, eventually they will stop reacting and they become more powerful when that happens. Here, you said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say on that power thing, I remember when you were sharing, if you don't think you can leave your relationship, you have no power.
Yes.
And I found that triggering once again. I'm like, what? I've come so far. What do you mean? But I really recognize the truth in that now. And I see, I've helped thousands of women change their relationship with food. And, there's just this constant fear. Like, I can see it in other people so much now, they want something in particular from their partnership, and they want, and they're not even giving it, number one.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And then, but they're also just sitting there accepting it, complaining about it, playing victim to it, without recognizing, like, you've got a choice. You could stay or you could go. Like, you could change this if you wanted. But it's like the most scary thing that I could ever have thought I was going to need to comprehend.
Yeah.
But because of all the work I'd done on myself, I'm just kind of moving through the process. It's not dramatic.
And you're doing well, but let me add here, what she had said is what I say in the program, is that so many people are afraid to leave their relationships. And I say, because I have been there in my own life, is that if you're afraid to leave a relationship, you have no power. And then what you do is you acquiesce to everything in the relationship because you don't want it to stop, even though it's not the right relationship for you or it's not working. You're afraid to lose that because it's what you know. So therefore, you just stay in this mediocre, complacent relationship for many years. And in that place, you have no power. So you stood up. Let me add something here. Is something else you hear me say is, you've heard me say before, is let other people have their own experience of life. And when you're trying to manage everything for your partner, I was going to say ex, but maybe that's not the case yet. But when you're trying to manage everything and be 100% responsible for everything in his life, you're not letting him have his own experience of life. Why? Because you're managing his life for him. So how can you expect him to grow and evolve when there's no need to, because you're being responsible for his life? So what I tell people is let everyone, unless they're small kids and you're a responsible parent for them, obviously, but as adults, let them have their own experience. And now he's having his own experience. And I would say at some point, I don't know when, he will grow. But who knows when that's going to happen?
And, it's not only that, and I still feel it's a scary thing to do, to just let someone go and have their own experience. But you know where it's most powerful for me?
But keep on going.
Yes. See, you can't get past anything. But where this is most powerful playing out for me right now is allowing my kids to have their experience of this new paradigm for their family. And because I think also the reason why I was so desperate to make it work, to make him better so that our family could stay together, because our kids needed two parents living together and blah, blah, blah.
Story and control.
Story.
And control.
And control. Yeah. And now I'm like, you know what? Whatever is going on for them, I have a large amount of peace about it. This is part of their life story now.
Yeah.
And because I know what I know, I am almost, we can create the story together. And it doesn't have to be, I recognize when they get into stories, my life is going to be terrible. Is it? Does it feel terrible right now? And we actually talk through it. Like, it's so powerful to be able to recognize when they're going into like a thought spiral and actually being able to go, hang on a minute, that's you're thinking that, but is that really true? And because I think we try to protect our children from feeling bad or from experiencing, life, and it doesn't actually serve them in the long run to do that, I don't feel. So, I mean, I've been able to overcome a lot of guilt. I have absolutely zero shame about the position that we're in right now. But I probably without doing a lot of the work on myself, I probably would have. But I don't. I feel like an empowered woman making empowered choices, and my kids. That's what they see right now.
Yeah. And so what is your story? Because everything's a story, so let's use stories that work for us too, okay? Because we can use them either direction. So it's a positive thing. What is your story now about being an empowered woman?
I think my story is around, right now, I feel very aligned to my values. And I wasn't clear on what my values were. I was kind of flailing about I don't think I ever actually made decisions in my life. Well, I made choices by not making decisions.
Which is a choice, right?
Which is a choice.
It's a default, right? Yeah.
I was like, I'm not the decision maker.
Oh,
we would end up in literally different states because Nick would have different jobs, and I'd be like, I'm just here because just got to go where the work is. Like, it was also passive. I was just like a passenger in my own life.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm in the driver's seat. I feel like I can recognize very clearly when my energy is being affected by a person or a situation. I feel like I have a choice every day about where I focus my attention. My business is booming because I am living in from a more aligned space,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not like I was attached to everything that my business was, instead of allowing it to become like I was becoming.
Wait.
And
Let's back up because we do have a lot of entrepreneurs, and you've heard me talk for quite some time about non-attachment. So let's go there. Is when you said you were attached to what your business was, break that down. What did that mean?
so I created a business helping women feed their family more whole foods.
Okay.
And I absolutely love, I have content coming out my eyeballs. I am good at it. I get results for people, and we work on a model of behavior change that's really around taking small steps. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all about just making small incremental changes for,
Yeah. Sure.
so our brains don't get overwhelmed. Yeah.
Very,
Love
very
it.
good. Very powerful approach too. Yes.
Right. So, and I can talk this, I can sell it, I can help people. They change their lives and what they eat. They feel great. And I could keep doing that. But for some reason, the launches just became a little bit like, eh.
Mm.
Uh, People were starting to approach me to work with them on lots of different things. So I actually have a business mastermind over here in Australia for online entrepreneurs. But that's because people ask me, not because, I wasn't recognizing how people were perceiving me and the changes and the growth and how well I was doing. I was
Yeah.
stuck in a story of self-deprecation for a very long time.
Yeah.
And and I wanted to teach this mindset stuff because it fundamentally changed my life. It has revolutionized my life, and I wanted to take a part of it and empower the women who I saw repeating these patterns of behavior with food. And that was another big part of the reason why I did TCP, was for my students. I
Mm.
wanted them, my community, I wanted to be able to give them the tools to transform. Because it's so obvious. You can give people the meal plans. You can give people the
They don't
recipes.
use them.
I could not make it simpler for people
Yeah.
to just eat basic real food.
Yeah.
But it was their stories that they would get, like, I've just got no time for this. No one eats it, so why do I bother? I mean, it's story after story after story. So I felt like, so as I did my own work, I started to see it more clearly in other people. But you've seen me, because it was
Mm.
this year that I launched. It was actually after our first retreat in Dallas that I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh man, I've just got to put this course together. I've just got to stop procrastinating. And do you know what was keeping me procrastinating? Was my story of lack of clarity.
Yeah.
I just had this thing, like I couldn't get clear on what to teach and how to teach it. So because I was so attached to that story and attached to this old business that, I mean, I wasn't in a position to take risks. I'm responsible for my 3 kids and
Right.
the rent and all of that sort of stuff. So I was like, I'm not clear. I don't think I could do this. I mean, I'm not a brain scientist. Blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah 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 blah. And also, like, I have a business that works. So why would I break that model? Why don't I just get over myself and keep doing the thing that I know people want from me? And it was just a whole load of stuff that I just needed to start letting go. Like, what if? And I think about this all the time. What if I knew, without a doubt, that this was going to be successful? What would I do?
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
work from that place a lot now. And I was like, I'd throw something out there. I'd throw it out there. I ended up creating this new program called Ready for Change. It's 4 weeks. I ended up charging double what I thought I was going to charge because you told me.
Yeah. I'm pushing you. Those of you listening, I'm still coaching her, so I'm behind her, continuing to help her
I mean, because one of
assist.
my stories was my community.
They won't pay. They won't
They
do
won't pay.
this. They won't do
This
that.
will be really confronting for them, and they're all on a budget and blah 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 blah. Anyway, turned out I had my most successful launch ever in my
Yeah.
business,
Yeah.
and yeah, the testimonials that I've gotten for that program are the best testimonials I've ever received, ever. Those women's lives are fundamentally changed now because they're changing from the inside. And that just required me letting go of my bullshit so I could get out of my way and serve people in the way that I'm meant to be serving right now. I'm not meant to be teaching people how to roast a chicken anymore.
Exactly. Let me add there my story. So, and I don't want to say too much on this episode, but I've worked with a shaman for a lot of years, an apprentice. And many years ago, he said to me, he goes, how come people, some big names are out there talking about the kind of work that I do, but you're with me and you don't talk about it? And I've taught persuasion and influence for a lot of years, over 2 decades. And a friend of mine one time said, this was in 2015. He said, Jim, have you considered that you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing? And I got into my story. I'm like, but I do, people pay me good money for this. I do really well at it. I do like it and I'm really good at it. And he's like, I think you need to be doing the transformational work, which I've done my entire life, but I wasn't taking it to the marketplace. So in 2015, I started doing one-to-one transformational coaching. In 2018, I opened up, at the beginning, I opened up to group transformational coaching. And now I'm impacting thousands and thousands and thousands of people, making millions and millions of dollars. Or rather, I should say, attracting for my service that I create, that I put out in the world, I'm putting out and I'm bringing back. And it's so easy. And I get up every day. And when I say it's so easy, it's that I'm aligned, which you've heard me talk to people in the group about, is we have to get aligned. When we align, things start working very easily. For you, for me, when we're not aligned, that's when it's hard. That's when we're working. That's when we're struggling. And we're not anywhere serving our life or other people's life to any degree that we can because we're not aligned. And you've experienced that as well.
100%. And I remember, we aren't operating in a vacuum of my business and my personal life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one or the other, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course I wasn't going to get the clarity that I wanted. Of course I wasn't going to be able to create the course that was coming through me like desperately while I was still trapped in a personal situation that just kept draining my energy. It was of course it's all taken off since I've made decisions that support me and my highest self. That was what I was waiting for all the time. Like there was so much around me that was just almost just waiting for me to say, and yes, now we're ready. All these things, you've been lining it up, Lisa, but you needed to make a decision to get aligned to your highest self.
Right.
And when you do, the feeling. Like it's like jumping on a fast train. I can't believe the stuff that's happened this year. And that's why, I really want to tell people who are in situations like I also wouldn't say that my marriage situation changed because without doing a lot of work on it and without taking it to the end of it. So it's not about just sort of jumping ship and, whatever, but you also can just do that. Like you don't have to wait for anyone or anything. You just you can make choices for you at any moment and you're always supported. This is the thing, like there is just everything about the universe wants you to do that. And when you do, it's extraordinary. So I just wanted to say to people, it's actually quite good on the other side. It's amazing on the other side when you actually feel that feeling of living a life that like aligned to your values and to your higher self.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've heard me talk about that for a long time, obviously. And I tell people, because my own life was there years ago, I've done this for a lot of years, persuasion and influence. And I was in a rut in 2014. And I was like, I'm making some good money. This is easy. But I'm not setting the world on fire. And I said to myself one day, because I tried to work mentally, I tried to work from the inside out. And when I say try, I tried. And I was like, I just can't it's like I'm in a room and I can't find the doorknob to get out. And I'm just not fulfilled. And I said one day, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So you know what? Even though I can't see where I want to go with all this and I can't see my next steps, why don't I just take some steps? Because something, that is something, and something leads to something. So if I just take some steps, even though I'm stepping in the dark, something will open up. And that's exactly what happened. because when I took a step, something opened up. I took more steps, more things opened up, and I am where I am today. But you know what? I didn't know that when I started on this path with this particular kind of coaching back in 2014 and 15. I just put one foot in front of the other confidently, and I knew that I loved doing it as well. And I'm aligned. I'm 100%. You hear me say all the time now, since you've known me in TCP, is this is my dharma. This is what I'm on the planet for. This is what I do. And Lisa and I are both sharing with everyone is once you get aligned, it's like, I don't know what phrase you used a bit ago, but everything opens up for you. It becomes, and you're like, wow, how did life get so easy? And you look at your checking account and you're like, how did all this money get in here? And I'm kidding, right? But I'm happy every day. I'm getting up and I'm smiling and I'm looking forward to it. That's the power of alignment. So
100% agree.
Yeah, I want to ask you, so I know your kids will be getting up in a bit, and we've successfully made it without the kids waking up right away or the dogs barking here at the house. If somebody, let's say you met somebody, male or female, and they gave you their story, which mirrors your old story, how can you tell them to transform, what would you tell them to transform their life the quickest?
There's two. Well,
Sure.
there's probably three pillars. Okay. I would say are the pillars that have changed everything for me. One is responsibility. So that was my big sort of slap in the face moment of like, you're creating all this, and if you are going to be 100% responsible for this situation, are you okay with it? Like, what needs to change? Like, I don't know how to operate in life without working from a place of complete responsibility for everything that is and isn't in my life. It's the fastest way to make change. So that module in TCP fundamentally changed my life.
But hang on. Wait, what you said there, I want to take apart because that could confuse some people. Being 100% responsible for what is and is not of my life, being responsible, but you're not responsible for other adults. I want to be very clear about that.
Correct. Okay. And also, I'm not talking about responsibilities, because I think, tasks, chores, I think a lot of people hear the word responsibility and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for so much. But that's not what this is about at all.
Correct. It's usually to-do list they think they're responsible for. But you know what? They can be completely irresponsible as a being for the outcomes in their own life, but they're still doing to-do list. Okay, that's one. Right. Two more.
That took me out of victimhood, and I needed to move out of victimhood. I didn't even know I was in there. So yeah.
Like Katie. Katie's like, I'm not a victim. What are you talking about? Many people are victims, and they don't know they're victims. Okay.
Like the martyrdom story of motherhood and all of that sort of stuff. Total victim. Yep. So the other one is stories, and that's it's being able to recognize, and this is what I teach in that 4-week program now, is like how to recognize you're telling yourself a story, because we're trapped and we're stuck and we're overwhelmed and we're repeating all this stuff. But once you get clear on when you are lying to yourself or you've created
self-deception,
then you give yourself back your power. And if you can learn how to work with your brain to create change and learn the power of attention and all of those sorts of things, then everything changes around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It can't not change when you understand that stuff. So
because it reflects you. The universe, the external world reflects the internal world. When the internal changes, the external changes automatically.
And you know what it's like, because in TCP, there's just so many examples of people who were like, what? I've just had a conversation with my partner. I didn't even have a clue he was feeling like that. And I've been all this, and this.
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, oh my God, I just made that up. And it's an extraordinary thing. And the last one would be energy. So my vibration, being able to master that, being able to know that I can almost, control that in a lot of ways.
Choose.
Has helped me recognize energy leaks. Like I now can really notice and it's surprising where you start to see energy leaks in your life, things that kind of start draining you, and to know that I've got the power to plug that, because I know 100% that my household, my business, my relationships, everything is impacted by my vibration
Yes.
and
Yep.
and my energy. And so if I'm being responsible for that, like the responsibility and the energy come hand in hand, well then how am I showing up for my best? Like how am I showing up and being able to manage that in the best way? Like sometimes it's just about, just something simple like putting on some dodgy 80s music and dancing around the house to shift the energy. But do you know what I mean? Like it can be so
What
simple.
do you mean? Do I know what you mean when I'm the one who shared these with you? So of course I know what you
I
mean.
know, but I'm hoping it makes sense coming out of my mouth, not
No,
yours.
perfect. And let me clarify from my perspective. It's like, for example, I tell people, and Lisa's heard me say this, it's like you have a tire on a car and it gets a nail in it. Well, that nail, you leave it there, you've got a slow leak in your, in your air in your tire, and then very quickly you have a flat tire. So what I look at is how many things do we let create slow leaks of energy in our life? Every time you're yelling at somebody or defending somebody or this happens or that happens or you're dealing, you got all these little leaks in the tire. And then before you know it, you're a flat tire. When I met you, you were a flat tire.
Oh,
Now
yeah.
you are like a brand new tire on a Porsche moving at 100 miles an hour. I mean, you've got great tires on your car, but you were leaking, it's like leaking energy everywhere when I met you. And it's so funny you say, well, do you understand? Well, of course I understand. I'm the one who shared that metaphor with you, is that we let people drain our energy. And you did a phenomenal job also of sharing it. It's always great, I think, when people hear things from a different perspective, because I can say it all day long and they're like, yeah, I get it, I get it. And then you say it because I've already said it. And I'm like, oh, I could really relate to Lisa's story about that.
Yeah.
Lisa, I thank you so much. And especially thank you for the people that are listening that can hear, they can see themselves in your story. And so you said responsibility, you said stories, and managing your energy were the three things that you would share with somebody right now to start
Yep.
transforming their life.
Yep.
So, all right, guys, you heard it from the transformational coach, Lisa Kordoff in Australia. These are the three things that you want to start doing to immediately start creating transformation in your life. Lisa, thank you. And you didn't have to put makeup on. Normally, she shoots her IG videos and she's in bed and no makeup on. You look phenomenal. Thank you so, so, so much. And is there anything you want to share with the listeners before we go?
Oh, TCP is a no-brainer.
Mm,
And it's the best investment I've ever made in myself. I mean, when like, some people use the word transformation, but Jim delivers the transformation with this content and his ability to coach you. And I
mm.
have been coached by some pretty great people, but I it's just the one thing that I would say, do it without even needing to know someone's situation. Like everyone should do TCP, because I feel like I've just got a bag of tools in my toolkit for my life, for my children's life, and that's a huge thing.
And they're not analytical. You have them as actual tools. It's not like
Oh,
you're
I'm
imagining
living.
tool. Yes, you're living proof and you're living it.
I'm living it. Like they're a part of me now. I can't not be the person who's done TCP. Like I'm a different person on the other side of TCP. So I'm so grateful to you. And
Mm.
I'm so glad you're living your Dharma, and all of your students, inside those groups, what happens in there is phenomenal. And I've never seen it happen in the way that it does. So thank you. And thanks
Mm.
for letting me share my story with your community. I definitely hope it helps people,
It
and
will.
they see that the immense power of doing this work.
Mm. Lisa, again, thank you so, so much. Go get the kids breakfast now. A big hug to you, and I'll catch you on one of the other calls. Okay, thank you,
Thanks, Jim.
Lisa. Okay, talk to you
Thank
later.
you.
Okay, bye-bye. Wow, what an episode. And I'm sure that many of you could relate to Lisa's story, and you could see yourself in some way in Lisa's story. And in my interpretation and opinion, that was a very, very powerful episode that can hopefully help many of you. Before I tell you what I think the transformational takeaway is, I want to remind you is that you may or you may not know that I'm doing a three-part transformational series titled the Be Do Have series. And it's all about ways of being, ways of having, which are about characteristics and ways of being. This series actually is very, very popular. There's no charge for it, and we have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are already going through it or that have registered for it. And I'm going to be doing it this final week before I yank it down, and I won't be doing it again until sometime next year. So we've already done, how many have we done now? We've already done a couple of trainings, and the third is today. We're doing 3 in the series. The third is today. The link is jimfortin.com/be-do-have, one word, jimfortin.com/be-do-have, and it's also going to be in the show notes. And in this series, and I've gotten thousands and thousands of positive comments, so I know that it's hitting home with people, is that I'm going to take you beyond what you've been learning here in the podcast, and I'm going to help you, go beyond this, but also come to know it and apply it at a deeper level in your life. So whatever you do, make sure that you go on over to jimfortin.com/be-do-have and watch the 3-part series before we take it down, which I believe will be on Thursday, September the 12th. Okay, the takeaways, the transformational takeaway, which I believe if you've been listening for a little while, for at least the last 6 weeks, every transformational story, you hear that S word, the story word. And you will hear every person talking about how when they change their stories, and Lisa talked a lot about that in this episode, when people change their stories, when they change what they say to themselves and what they talk to themselves about, everything in life changes. So, you've heard me say before, or may have, even as I'm telling you about stories, notice that you are telling yourself stories about stories. You are telling yourself a story about what I'm telling you about stories. That's because we as human beings create story after story after story. And if you're not getting what you want in life and you don't have the health and the wellness and everything that you want, change your story. Okay, finally, the next episode is episode number 51, and that episode is going to be about how to use your mind for higher awareness and intuition. All of us have this extraordinary power of mind, but most of us never tap into it. So make sure that you listen to the next episode, how to use your mind for higher awareness and intuition. Okay, thanks for listening, and hopefully I'll catch you over also on the Be-Do-Have series training, which, by the way, is no charge. Okay, catch you later. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this entire podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with your friends and family. If you found value, they will too. So please share via your social media channels. Also, if you have questions, I'm here to assist. You can email me questions to support@jimfortin.com, and I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. Also, if you want transformational content like this daily, connect with me on Instagram. My Instagram name is I am Jim Fortin. Finally, I do have a personal request. I believe that we're all here to help others and to grow and evolve ourselves. Together, you and I, let's help more people. If you would please leave a review on iTunes, and a good one, by the way. I'd be grateful, and through your assistance together, we can transform more lives. Thanks for listening.